Hello everyone. Now, this is not my normal video. There are two reasons for that. One being that I'm sick and I'm not in the best shape to do readings, but also that I have gotten a message that I have been ignoring forever, and that is providing some spiritual guidance or advice. And I pulled some cards that kind of gave me the idea that it was time to share a certain message, which will grow as I continue to connect with you. The cards are temperance, 6 of coins, meaning that I am here to share this with you. 8 of swords, so if you're feeling extreme internalized anxiety, then this message is especially for you. And the high priestess. Now, temperance and the high priestess are the guides of today's message because it is about spirituality and true balance. Now, the strange thing is that in my time of being sick, I have, like some people did during COVID, I've lost my ability to smell and at certain times lost my hearing and my taste. And I haven't been worried about this at all, but what I've noticed is that I have begun to feel a sense of numbness to my reality. Now, in many circumstances, this can be dangerous, this can be scary, and you should be, watchful and mindful of friends or families members that talk about going numb. In my circumstance, this has been a spiritually liberating experience because I've been very luckily reading some books that talk a lot about the separation from the human experience to your spiritual or your conscious experience. Now, for those of you that don't know or aren't familiar with some more spiritual or mindful terms, when we discuss, for example, the ego, we can mean it as someone who is prideful, someone who is egoic, someone who has a big ego. But there are deeper senses to it that don't need to have such a negative context. The ego is your survival mechanism. It is what guides you to make decisions to protect yourself. It is what makes you feel fear. It can also be what makes you feel pride, to some extent, certain varieties of love or admiration. It is the five senses. And Nero Knowledge, he is another YouTuber that does spirituality and whatnot. In his book, he discusses that ego is your ability to experience the five senses. It's a very sensory experience, which is perfect if you're trying to survive in a sensory world. And that is what we're doing here in our human bodies. And so the idea of removing certain senses, removing my connection to my ego, because my ego cannot communicate to me in all of the forms it normally does, I was feeling, at first I thought it was grogginess or cloudiness, but what I realized was I was experiencing this numbness. And when I was, I don't know, this was 5+ years ago, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a similar numbness occur, and it was the most spiritually centered, let's say, experience that I've ever had. I would say I was the closest to my high priestess that I had ever been, my higher self, if you will. I felt like it was speaking so clearly to me. It was actually telling me that consciousness is the only thing that matters, and sharing that message and learning about it is the only thing that matters, along with many other wonderful stories and messages. And I didn't experience it for a long time until this recent time when I got sick. And something I have realized that ego does completely naturally, and that is really when we talk about the 8 of swords, when we talk about anxiety that is internally developed, internally created, this is your ego trying to protect you. You'll notice, unless you're in a very dire environment or situation where your physical body is in danger, you can feel that same level of anxiety and fear towards not passing a test, towards not getting a certain job or not being loved by a certain person. The fear will manifest to the same extreme level that a very serious physical, an earthquake situation or something could create, this kind of stress in the body. There are numerous studies, and when you look at manifestation, for example, I mean, it's all there, right? We can tell that our minds are very powerful, but more specifically, the way that our ego is trying to create something so that it's useful, when maybe that's not necessarily the most beneficial thing. And so, going back to this numbness, what I recognized in my latest experience of numbness is this idea of enlightenment. Now, I am by no means enlightened. I think that I've had brief moments of feeling what the early stages are of someone who becomes more aligned with their conscious self or their higher self, but it comes in waves. It comes and goes, and it has been gone for a long time. But something that we do in our egoic state, and this is where I really want to talk about temperance, is we don't necessarily have a true balance when we're in our egoic state. Things have to be labeled, and that makes sense, right? When you're trying to label something as good or bad, it is important in some contexts. Is this food good, healthy, or is it bad, poisonous? Is that person good, safe, or bad, dangerous? Your ego has constantly been working and labeling these things in your life so that you are protected, so the physical body is protected, because your soul can never be destroyed. If your body is destroyed, yes, that is unfortunate to leave this earth, especially, in a dire circumstance, but your soul is not worried about these things. Your consciousness is not worried about these things. It is your ego that is worried because it is your physical form. It's trying to protect your physical form. But we seem to have this idea that enlightenment and being in the ideal state of existence and the ideal state of mindfulness means that you will feel positively. You will feel lots of positive emotions. And that is the ego also involving itself in attachment. And I think as long as the ego exists and we decide to communicate these experiences in words, the ego will always be there. There's a quote, I think Sydney Banks discusses it in one of his books, which is, wisdom is knowledge before form, meaning the idea before it is turned into a label, a word. A tree is a tree because we've called it that. Before that, it is this true conscious knowledge that we innately have, but we limit it by giving it a name. Maybe there is a name that could be better suited. There's a limitation once ego applies label, but ego applies a label to keep you safe. And anyway, my point of this is your experience does not have to become positive. If you are in a negative state, if you are fearful, if you are afraid, if you are angry, if you are sad, and you are thinking, oh, life is about being happy, life is about feeling in love, feeling grateful, feeling joyful, feeling all of things that feel very opposite on the spectrum of emotion. I think this is kind of a yo-yo effect, or like a bouncy ball. If a bouncy ball hits one wall, it'll hit the other wall and go back and forth, and it will be very tumultuous. But when you apply temperance, when you apply balance, and your idea is not to just become happy or just become one way or the other. And I see this also with people pleasers. They go from being super nice to everybody, even if that's a negative thing, but they're perceived very positively, to being, I am the villain now, I'm in my villain era. And that is also just running up and down on these extremes. And experiencing this what I have noticed to be a lack of emotion, a lack of identification of good or bad. That is when I enter my enlightenment, if you will, or my alignment with conscious experience. And that is when I feel peace. And peace for me is not, when I describe it here, it's something that is innately positive or negative. The moment I apply a feeling towards that conscious experience, I'm no longer in that conscious experience. I'm now experiencing the ego enjoying a good emotion or a bad emotion. And it comes from this detachment of applying labels to everything, of determining that something is good or bad. I think it would be a very interesting exercise if you have the opportunity to look at something that scares you. Look at failing a test that you really want to pass. And you see that as negative. You see, if I fail the test, then I have to retake it. And then what if I fail again? And then I can't get a job. And if I can't get a job, then I won't have a home. And if I don't have a home, I'll be on the street. If I'm on the street, I won't be loved. And if I'm not loved, I'll die. You know, all of these layers that the ego creates, right? It's trying to connect a small issue to your survival. Even though those things may be very far apart, it goes, nope, they're right next to each other. So if you don't pass this test, you'll die. Which my brain goes to all the time. You're not alone. But why I'm discussing this here is next time you feel that way, you can go about it and just imagine what the opposite label would be of failing a test. There may be, as strange as this is, there may be a circumstance where failing a test is a good or neutral experience. It can be an experience that says, hey, you know what? I failed this test. Is there any, and this is where AI is also wonderful, is there any way I could see positivity out of failing a test? I don't have to believe it. I just have to see it. And by each time, I mean, I'm sure you have plenty of negatives, so you don't really need to pull more negatives, but say pulling more positives, you kind of come to a neutrality. And that neutrality kind of helps you eliminate, well, this isn't really a good thing or a bad thing. This is just, I've chosen to label it as bad. Other people have chosen to label it as good. But those are the labels. The thing itself is not an emotional experience. It just is. And this can be applied to wonderful things too, which I know is a lot harder. We don't want to get rid of those positive labels because they're so addictive. They feel so good. You know, the idea of, oh, this ice cream is really wonderful. I love eating it. I don't even know if I would want to apply a bad idea to it, but getting to that neutrality of this is ice cream. And I don't have to associate good or bad. This is just an experience. Now, of course, I'm not saying do this throughout your entire life. I'm not saying do this at every moment. These are very loose examples of trying to explain how I personally believe that that level of neutrality, that level of unattached, it's not even thinking because thinking involves ego, but that feeling or existence that is unattached to the labels that ego has applied to save us, keep us where we need to be, surviving. Playing with this, think of it as play. Your mind is a place to play. It is a very complex system. It's a creature of its own that we are discovering. And so if you're feeling this anxiety, I really hope that you can find, even if it's simply staring at a wall and looking at that wall and not feeling negatively or positively towards it, and really understanding what it feels like to not have a strong feeling towards something, and slowly applying that to more areas of your life, it will actually make it easier to pass through certain emotional boundaries that you've set for yourself that are negative, or ideas that you believe are positive, but you are not capable of getting there. I know this is a bit strange. I am still discovering it and learning it because I'm still reading about this, but it brought me such a sense of true peace for the past couple of days. And I've been going through some pretty odd situations, let's just say that, because I don't even feel like applying a true emotional label to it. And this has truly helped. And I was trying to think if I should share it or not. And then by pulling my lovely cards today, I think that gave me the inspiration I needed to apply it and to share it with you. So anyhow, I will be back with a tarot video as soon as this cold or whatever it is finishes up. If you have any special requests for that tarot video, you're welcome to leave it in the comments. But anyhow, thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was enjoyable, even if it was a little bit different. And I will see you very soon.